So when you talk about, and I thought it was interesting when we talked about this, you talked about substantiating opinions with facts of some sort. Can you go a little bit more? Because what exactly do you mean by a fact? And I'm not asking the question like, can you define what a woman is? But I mean, a fact, some people might say, well, that's a fact, that's an opinion, that's an observation, that's this, that. What in your profession and your field is considered to be a fact that can be used to substantiate an opinion? And I'd also like to ask a question about inflammatory adjectives as well that come into a report. But let do the first part, and then I'll ask you about the inflammatory adjectives as well.
Yeah, so what I might define as a fact in my field may be defined as a fact in terms of the legal field, in terms of rules of evidence, by Chapter 700. But a fact basically can be obtained by direct observation, which there really was none. There was no direct observation of the parent-child interaction, nor was there any collateral information gathering by others that have watched my parent-child interaction.
So you're saying direct observation and collateral sources as well then?
Yeah, okay. And the way you tell collateral sources from just hearsay, according to the legal profession, is one based a little bit upon judgment and skill, so for example, in our field, if I'm assessing a patient, and usually the standard of assessing a patient is not only direct observation, but gathering what we call collateral information from multiple sources. And, if we identify that there's, within a family, some family conflict, and we have some indications that maybe some collateral sources may be biased or kind of lying to us, based on skill, based upon previous knowledge and education, and fitting it into the overall picture, we can weight that collateral source according to its validity, But then we have lab tests, x-rays, other assessment techniques that are more concrete, So if I'm going to say somebody has a personality disorder, I can't do that just by, meeting him for 45 minutes and saying, okay, they have a personality disorder. I would have to do psychological testing that's valid and reliable, and in this case, it's reliable with the Dahlberg challenge as well. In gathering all that information, I could say, okay, based on X, Y, and Z types of evidence that I have, my opinion would be, A, B, and C. Now, if like in my case, the reliable tests, which were the MMPI and the personality assessment inventory, were done, basically showing on one account pretty much normalized results without any critical areas, maybe a couple of what's called idiosyncratic responses, but hey, I mean,
everybody has
probably over 90% of the population has an idiosyncratic response. And then, the personality assessment, my clustering, so to speak, matches those with more altruistic professions. And then somebody's saying, well, I have severe personality deficits and I'm actually psychotic, but I've gone through, some pretty top grade education. I grew up in a stable family household that, high achiever. That opinion, those statements wouldn't really be valid. It doesn't match the other information gathering, which is what I encountered in the forensic assessment by Dr. Sherry.
By Dr. Alyssa Sherry.
Dr. Alyssa Sherry, apparently.
Well, I did the doctor. I guess she's got a doctorate, but whatever.
And the other thing that was lacking, to kind of diverge a little bit, was really no gathering of collateral assessments of the parent-child interaction. The excuse can be made, well, it'll be biased and, they're going to lie for you or something like that. Well, that's possible, okay, but that's not a valid excuse to avoid gathering collateral information, because if you're a forensic investigator and you've had 14 years of expertise as a forensic investigator, which means you're advertising yourself as an expert in the interface of psychology and law, well, then you would be pretty skilled at figuring out where the lies are, okay, and figuring out where the lies are not, okay? Because that's part of the collateral information, and that would fit within the standards of your professional licensing board, because that's one of the routes of information you collect, in addition to the the hard line psychological testing, and then you do direct observations. So there was really no direct observation of the parent-child relationship.
No direct observation, no gathering of collateral sources.
There was an observation in playing with the child for maybe 45 minutes. There was not really an observation of, hey, let's watch David, how he interacts with his child over several periods. Whereas there was an unequal weighting of that, perhaps with the other party.
Right.
Okay. And then the hardline psychological testing that was gathered did not match the statements in the report.
Yeah.
But the other thing that was pointed out to me by some experts is, I guess, the possibility that the Rorschach test is used, but that's not a reliable, valid test to make a diagnosis.
The Rorschach test being
it's the ink block test.
The ink block, yeah.
The famous ink block test.
There we go.
That
Boy, I get
traditionally, that has been traditionally, I guess it's the hallmark of psychiatrists. Where it's like.
Is that why maybe some of them are considered quacks?
Yeah. And so you cannot take the Rorschach test alone and say, okay, this person has a diagnosis. It doesn't work out that way. It's just not a reliably valid test.
Yeah.
There's too much observational interpretation. That means that the person administering it, based upon their own perceptions, their own biases, their own expertise, can have different interpretations. Now, what you can do with it is you can do these other tests, and you can say, if these other tests show some really severe problems, and then you do the Rorschach is more likely going to coincide, okay, because of the severity of the problems.
Right.
Now there's some cognitive tests, and in the report, she writes, I was not able to complete the cognitive test, so because of that, there is a need to do further neuropsychological testing. Okay. Well, the fact was I did complete it, and the fact was, despite that there was some assistance needed on a section, I was able to complete it. Now, does this relate validly to my parent-child abilities or validly to the parent-child interaction? No, it does not.
Yeah.
What is its value? If I had significant difficulty in cognitive abilities, all right, okay, maybe we need to look at that. But when you look at the Texas Family Code, and you look at particular chapters of the Texas Family Code, and a forensic psychologist, so to speak, is saying that they want to refer a client for further neuropsychological testing or psychological testing, there are specific criteria to do that.
Okay.
I didn't match any of those criteria. It either been my objective testing or my subjective report.
Right.
And you need that in order to have a serious undiagnosed mental health problem.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you don't have a serious undiagnosed mental health problem, then why would you refer and potentially cost this person another $5 to $10 grand to go get independent neuropsychological testing as a parent? So what is the value of this? The other thing, the Family Code and the Texas Administrative Code, as well as the Texas Rule of Psychology, they all emphasize you have to be able to validate your findings.
Yes.
You always have to be able to validate. It's not maybe you can or maybe you should, it's must. Or you shall. I'm going to
ask you about that, the must and the shall and the may.
Must. Yeah. You must. You shall or you must.
Okay.
It's not that, maybe you can get by with it, or maybe you don't need it, or, maybe it's your determination. It's not very ambiguous, okay? Now, an evaluator can decide what psychometric tests or psychological tests they may do depending on the indication. But why would you automatically say, okay, we're going to do an MMPI, we're going to do a PIA, we're going to do a Rorschach, and we're going to do some other neurocognitive test if you don't have an indication. If the parent is saying, well, I'm not really depressed, of course, the legal system and this whole legal thing's been stressful to me, and I try to keep myself healthy. I enjoy keeping myself involved in hobbies, paying attention to the child, my profession. But what other indications are there to do the standard battery of tests? There's not. So you first have to assess the person and find out what's indicated. and then Then you do the testing, and this is within the realm of the standards of your profession, which is
Right.
emphasized by the Texas Family Code.
Yeah.
It's not just to, okay, we're going to do a shotgun battery of tests and see
Yeah.
what we come up with,
Yeah.
and then we're going to advertise that no parent is entitled to 50-50, which is completely contrary to sections in the Texas Family Code,
Yeah.
completely contrary to personal protection rights from the U.S. Constitution.
Yeah.
And mind you, who else pays attention to the Constitution has been sued for violations of the Constitution? DFPS. And they're an investigative body,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So why shouldn't people that are on that intersection of forensics, law and psychiatry, or law and psychology also have to pay attention
Yeah.
to that? Because that involves the issue of potential criminal actions, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, I was going to just say, it sounded to me, from what I heard you saying,
Yeah.
is that Dr. Alyssa Sherry did not adhere to any does not appear to adhere to her professional duties and standards and everything else. If she has an opinion that, as far as I can hear you saying, there was no direct observation, there was no gathering of collateral sources, I don't know what type of valid test she gave you. If you mentioned the Rorschach a few times, did she just rely on the Rorschach test or what? I don't know what's going on there, but it also sounds like maybe well, I'll let you answer that part first.
Well, there was the MMPI and there was the PIA, the Personality Assessment Inventory, the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory revised, and basically, essentially, they were within normal range.
Okay.
And the clusters were actually associated with more normal range altruistic clusters of people.
So that basically, she's only done the testing part, then, is what I hear you say, as far as the forming of her opinions?
She did the testing, but her opinions aren't based on the testing results.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So, the testing be damned. I've got my opinion.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. Okay, that actually aligns a little bit more with what I've heard about Dr. Alyssa Sherry.
Well,
that makes some interest. Okay, got it.
Yeah. So in further discovery, which I can remember, she wrote an email saying, she had released her records of prior cases with names. Well, that's what you do when you're being asked to provide discovery as an expert witness.
Yeah.
You naturally find out all you can about the expert witness. And there's the impeccable expert witness and there's the non-impeccable expert witness. And depending on what they're considered is how you approach the situation. But she wrote us an email to both parties, essentially identifying if we had tried to contact any of the prior cases, she would have the opinion that it represented a lack of boundaries and a lack of boundaries with the parent-child relationship.
No discovery, David.
Which would be basically leveraging her opinion
Yeah.
based on how much we did the investigation.